I always had my doubts. We should do a DNA test. I must have replayed those words 1,000 times in my head since that Tuesday evening. They hung in the air of our kitchen like an uninvited guest that refuses to leave. Mark had said it so calmly, almost as an afterthought while loading the dishwasher. As if he'd merely suggested trying a new restaurant or switching cable providers. 15 years. 15 years of marriage, family photos on the mantle, homework help, and late-night fevers. 15 years of watching our son Jacob grow from a squirming pink bundle to a lanky teenager with his father's jawline and my stubbornness. Or so I thought. What are you talking about? I laughed nervously, certain he was joking. Mark wasn't the joking type, but this had to be an exception. DNA test for what? He closed the dishwasher and pressed start before meeting my eyes. His expression remained unchanged, methodical, determined, the same look he wore when reviewing quarterly reports for his accounting firm. For Jacob, he said simply. I want to know for sure. The wooden spoon I'd been using to stir spaghetti sauce slipped from my fingers, splattering red across the pristine white tile floor. It looked like a crime scene. In many ways, it was about to become one. My name is Emily Parker. 6 weeks ago, I was a 38-year-old physical therapist with a comfortable suburban life in Columbus, Ohio. I had a successful private practice, a dependable husband of 15 years, and a bright, compassionate son who just started high school. We had a 4-bedroom colonial with a finished basement, 2 cars in the garage, and a golden retriever named Cooper. The American dream, neatly packaged and tied with a bow. Our life ran like clockwork, a well-oiled machine of routine and predictability. Mark left for work at 7:30 a.m. sharp. Jacob caught the school bus at 7:45. I saw my first patient at 9 o'clock. We had family dinner at 6:30 most nights. On Fridays, we ordered pizza and watched movies. Saturdays were for Jacob's soccer games and household chores. Sundays meant brunch after church, followed by meal prep for the week ahead. We weren't unhappy. At least, I didn't think we were. But maybe that was the problem, we weren't anything. We existed in a comfortable numbness that I mistook for stability. I should have known better. In physical therapy, when a patient says they feel nothing, it's often worse than when they're screaming in pain. Numbness means the nerve damage runs deep. I'm sorry, you want to do what? I asked again, certain I had misheard him. Mark sighed and leaned against the counter. I want to get a DNA test for Jacob. Why on earth would you want to do that? He's your son. My voice rose sharply, panic edging in. Is he? Mark asked quietly. Because I've always had this feeling, Emily. Something that never quite added up. I felt my face flush hot with anger. 15 years. You wait 15 years to bring this up? To accuse me of, what exactly? Cheating on you? Getting pregnant with someone else's child and passing him off as yours? I'm not accusing you of anything, he said in that infuriatingly calm voice he used when I was upset. I just want to know the truth. The truth? The truth is that you were there in the delivery room when Jacob was born. You cut the umbilical cord, for God's sake. I know, and that's why this doesn't make sense to me either. But I can't shake this feeling. He paused, running a hand through his graying hair. Look, I've been talking to Dr. Phillips about this. I froze. Dr. Phillips was Mark's therapist. He'd started seeing her about 6 months ago for what he called midlife adjustments. I had been proud of him for taking his mental health seriously, something rare for men his age. You've been discussing doubts about your son with your therapist instead of your wife? The betrayal stung worse than the accusation. She suggested that knowing for certain might help me move past these feelings. That uncertainty can be more damaging than difficult truths. I wanted to scream. To throw something. Instead, I carefully wiped the sauce from the floor, buying time as I tried to process what was happening. Mark, I have never been unfaithful to you. Not once in almost 16 years of marriage. Jacob is your son. Then you won't mind doing the test, he said, as if it were the most reasonable request in the world. It's just a cheek swab. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize, and we can move forward knowing for sure. I stood up, tossing the soiled paper towels into the trash with more force than necessary. And if you're right? What then? He didn't answer. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Next to me lay a man who had just shattered the foundation of our marriage with a single sentence. I stared at the ceiling, replaying our relationship in my mind, searching for cracks I might have missed. Met in college, Mark was a senior accounting major when I was a sophomore studying physical therapy. He wasn't the type to sweep a girl off her feet with grand romantic gestures, but he was steady, reliable. He remembered birthdays and anniversaries. He showed up when he said he would. After my tumultuous childhood with an alcoholic father who disappeared for days at a time, Mark's consistency felt like a life raft. Married 3 years later, right after I finished my degree. Waited 2 years to start trying for a baby, just like we'd planned. Jacob came along in our 5th year of marriage. The pregnancy had been textbook perfect. The delivery, while long, had no complications. He was born at Ohio Regional Medical Center on April 17, 2009, at 3:47 a.m., weighing 7 pounds, 8 ounces. Mark had been there through it all: the morning sickness, the midnight ice cream runs, the Lamaze classes. He'd held my hand through 22 hours of labor and cried when they placed Jacob on my chest. How could he possibly doubt that this was his child? The next morning, over coffee, I tried a different approach. What exactly makes you think Jacob isn't yours? I asked, keeping my voice level. Mark hesitated, stirring his coffee though he took it black. It's a lot of little things. The way he looks. His personality. His interests. He has your chin, your height. Everyone says he has your walk. But he has neither of our eye colors. Or hair texture. His artistic abilities certainly don't come from either of us. I rolled my eyes. That's called genetics, Mark. Recessive genes, mutations. My grandfather had blue eyes. Your mother was artistic before her accounting career. It's more than that, he insisted. I've never felt the connection I thought I would. From the beginning, something felt off. The confession knocked the wind out of me. For 15 years, my husband had been looking at our son and feeling disconnected. Searching his face for resemblances and coming up empty. How had I missed this? Why didn't you ever say anything? I whispered. What was I supposed to say? Hey, I don't feel like this kid is mine even though I have no reason to suspect you've been unfaithful. I thought I was just broken somehow. That I wasn't cut out for fatherhood. Despite my anger, my heart broke for him. For us. For Jacob, who had no idea his father had spent his entire life questioning their bond. Fine, I said finally. We'll do the test. But Jacob doesn't find out about this. And afterward, you're going to get more intensive therapy to figure out why you've spent 15 years emotionally detached from your son. Mark nodded, looking relieved. Thank you. I've already ordered the kits online. They should arrive tomorrow. Of course he had. Always efficient, my husband. The test kits arrived in a plain cardboard box. Inside were 3 sealed packages, each containing a plastic tube with a cotton swab. The instructions were simple: rub the swab on the inside of your cheek for 30 seconds, place it in the tube, seal, and mail back in the prepaid envelope. Why are there 3? I asked, examining the packages. 1 for each of us, Mark replied. You, me, and Jacob. You're testing me too? I couldn't hide my shock. It's standard procedure. They need to confirm maternal DNA to properly analyze the paternal connection. It made sense from a scientific standpoint, but it still felt like another accusation. I was tempted to refuse, but that would only feed into whatever paranoia had gripped my husband. The hardest part was swabbing Jacob without raising suspicions. We waited until he was engrossed in a video game, then Mark casually approached him. "Hey buddy, I'm participating in a genetics study through work. They need family samples. Mind helping out?" Jacob barely looked up from his game. "Whatever, Dad," he mumbled, opening his mouth for the swab without question. The casual trust between them made me want to cry. Jacob had no idea his father was testing the very foundation of their relationship. The ease with which Mark lied to our son made me wonder what else he might have hidden over the years. Mailed the samples that afternoon. The company promised results within 5 to 7 business days. A week to determine whether my marriage had been built on truth or lies. A week that stretched before me like an eternity. The waiting was excruciating. Mark acted as if everything was normal, going about his routine with the same methodical precision he always had. I, on the other hand, felt like I was coming apart at the seams. Every interaction with Jacob became charged with new significance. Did he really have Mark's chin, or had I just convinced myself of that over the years? Was his artistic talent truly an anomaly in our family of numbers people? The more I looked, the more uncertain I became. I found myself staring at old baby photos, trying to objectively assess who he resembled more. On Thursday night, 3 days after mailing the samples, I found myself sitting in the parking lot of Ohio Regional Medical Center. I hadn't planned to come here. I'd told Mark I was meeting a friend for dinner, but something pulled me toward the place where Jacob was born. The hospital had been renovated several times since 2009. The maternity ward had moved to a new wing, and the lobby had been modernized with sleek furniture and digital directories. Still, the sterile smell and fluorescent lighting brought back memories of that April morning, the exhaustion, the pain, the indescribable joy when they placed my son in my arms. "Can I help you?" A security guard approached, eyeing me suspiciously as I stood staring at the building. "No, I'm fine," I said quickly. "Just reminiscing. My son was born here." His face softened. "Congratulations. How old?" 15, I replied, the number catching in my throat. He chuckled. "They grow up fast. Have a good night, ma'am." I nodded and returned to my car, unsure why I'd come. What did I expect to find? Some clue that would explain my husband's sudden crisis of paternity? Reassurance that no mistakes had been made the day Jacob was born. I started the engine but couldn't bring myself to leave. Instead, I pulled out my phone and searched hospital baby switch statistics. The results were simultaneously comforting and terrifying. The chances of babies being switched at birth in U.S. hospitals were incredibly low. Some estimates put it at 1 in 8 million. Modern security protocols made such mistakes nearly impossible, but nearly impossible wasn't the same as impossible. And hospitals in 2009 didn't have all the security measures that were standard today. RFID tracking. Digital footprints. Matching ID bands with barcodes. I scrolled through article after article, reading about historical cases. Most switches were discovered when the children were still infants, through blood type incompatibilities or observant nurses catching mistakes. The cases discovered years later often came to light through DNA testing for medical reasons or, increasingly, through ancestry websites. By the time I drove home, my mind was racing with possibilities I'd never considered. What if Mark's instincts were right, but not in the way he thought? What if the issue wasn't infidelity but something much more complicated? I didn't share these thoughts with Mark. Part of me was still furious that he'd questioned my fidelity. Another part feared giving credence to his doubts. So I kept quiet and waited for the results that would either repair or destroy our family. The email arrived 6 days after we'd mailed the samples. I was at work when my phone chimed with the notification, "Your DNA test results are ready." My hands trembled so badly I couldn't tap the link. I excused myself from the clinic, telling my receptionist I needed to handle a family matter, and locked myself in my office. Taking a deep breath, I opened the email and logged into the testing company's portal. The results loaded slowly, each pixel revealing a truth I wasn't prepared to face. When the page finally displayed, I had to read it 3 times before the information sank in. Maternal DNA match, 99.9999% positive paternal DNA match, 0% positive. The world tilted on its axis. I gripped the edge of my desk to steady myself, certain I must be misreading the results. But the numbers didn't change. The science was clear: Jacob was definitely my son. He was definitely not Mark's, but that was impossible. I had never been with anyone else. Never, I called Mark with shaking hands. Did you see? I asked when he answered. Yes. His voice was flat, emotionless. I think we need to talk in person. Mark, I swear to you, not over the phone, he interrupted. I'll be home by 6. He hung up before I could respond. I sat in stunned silence, staring at the results on my screen. How could science tell me that my son had no genetic connection to my husband when I knew with absolute certainty that I had been faithful? It defied logic. It defied reality itself, unless a cold realization washed over me. There was one possibility I hadn't considered, one explanation that would make these results make sense. My hand flew to my mouth as the truth crystallized in my mind, canceled my remaining appointments and drove straight back to Ohio Regional Medical Center. I'm sorry, but we can't release medical records without proper authorization, the hospital administrator explained for the 3rd time. Even if they're your own records, we have protocols. I understand that, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But this is an emergency. I need to know if there were any other baby boys born around the same time as my son on April 17, 2009. The woman, her nameplate read Patricia Geller, patient records, gave me a sympathetic but firm look. That would be protected information even if I could access it easily, which I can't. Our records from that period aren't fully digitized. Please, I begged, leaning across her desk. My husband just got a DNA test showing he's not our son's father, but I have never been unfaithful. I need to know if there could have been a mix-up. Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by alarm. Oh my goodness. That's a serious allegation. I'm not looking to sue or cause trouble, I assured her. I just need to know the truth. She glanced around the office, then lowered her voice. I can't help you officially. But as a mother myself, I understand your distress. She slid a business card across the desk. This is Dr. Eleanor Winters. She was the head of obstetrics back then. Retired now, but still consults occasionally. If anyone would remember or have access to information, it would be her. I clutched the card like a lifeline. Thank you. Thank you so much. I didn't give you this, she said firmly. And Mrs. Parker? Good luck. Dr. Winters agreed to meet me the next day at a coffee shop near her home. She was in her late 60s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and keen eyes that missed nothing. She listened without interruption as I explained the situation. April 17, 2009, she repeated when I finished. That was during my tenure, yes. There was a storm that night. Power fluctuations. She frowned, trying to remember. We had backup generators, of course, but it was chaotic. My heart raced. Were there other baby boys born that night? Almost certainly, she nodded. We delivered between 10 and 15 babies daily back then. But without access to records, I couldn't tell you specifically. Is it possible, I forced myself to ask, that babies could have been switched? Accidentally? Dr. Winters didn't dismiss the question outright, which terrified me more than anything. Our protocols were designed to prevent such mistakes. ID bans, constant supervision. But human error can occur in any system, especially during disruptions like power outages. So it's possible, I whispered. Possible but unlikely, she clarified. Listen, Mrs. Parker, before you go down this road, you should consider other explanations. Genetic anomalies. Lab errors in the DNA testing. I've considered everything, I said. Nothing else makes sense. I know I gave birth to my son. I know I never cheated on my husband. The only explanation is that the baby I gave birth to isn't the baby I took home. She studied me with clinical detachment. If, and this is a significant if, there was a switch, what do you hope to accomplish by uncovering it? Your son is 15. The bonds you've formed aren't dependent on genetics. I need the truth, I said simply. For all of us. Dr. Winters sighed heavily. I can't officially help you access records. But I still have colleagues at the hospital. I can make some discreet inquiries about births on that date. No promises. That's all I ask, I said gratefully. As she stood to leave, she placed a hand on my shoulder. Be careful what you wish for, Mrs. Parker. Some truths change everything. Mark's reaction to my hospital theory was unexpected. I thought he'd be relieved that there might be an explanation that didn't involve infidelity. Instead, he seemed almost disappointed. A baby switch? That's what you're going with? He shook his head, pacing our living room. Do you know how rare that is? More common than immaculate conception, I shot back. Which is what you're suggesting happened if you think I cheated but Jacob is still genetically mine. I'm just saying it seems convenient. A hospital error that nobody noticed for 15 years. Convenient? I was incredulous. You think I find it convenient that our son might not be the child I gave birth to? That somewhere out there could be my biological son being raised by strangers? That stopped him. The implication hung heavy between us. If Jacob wasn't genetically Mark's son, but was mine, and I had never been unfaithful, then our biological child might be out there somewhere. I'm sorry, he said finally. This is just a lot to process. For both of us, I agreed, softening slightly. Look, Dr. Winters is checking birth records. If there were other baby boys born that night, we can pursue DNA testing. If not, we'll have to consider other explanations. And Jacob? When do we tell him? Not until we know something for certain, I said firmly. There's no need to turn his world upside down based on theories. Mark nodded slowly. Okay. But Emily, if this is true, if there was a switch, it doesn't just affect us. There's another family out there who might have our biological son. The thought had been haunting me since the DNA results arrived. Another couple raising my flesh and blood, while I raised theirs. Had they noticed discrepancies too? Had they questioned connections, resemblances, inherited traits? Or had they simply embraced their child without the doubts that had plagued Mark? One step at a time, I said, more to myself than to him. First, we find out if it's even possible. Dr. Winters called 3 days later. There were 4 baby boys born at Ohio Regional between midnight and 6 a.m. on April 17, 2009, she said without preamble. Including your son. My heart stuttered. 4? Yes. I can't give you names or medical details, but I can tell you that all 4 were healthy, full-term deliveries. Were they all in the nursery at the same time? Most likely. Our practice then was to return babies to the nursery during mother's rest periods. During the storm and power fluctuations, I prompted, she sighed. Yes. Look, I've gone further than I should professionally. But as someone who dedicated her life to bringing babies safely into this world, I understand your need for answers. The hospital keeps birth announcements from the local paper in their archives. Public information. April 18 and 19, 2009 editions would have announcements for births on the 17th. It wasn't much, but it was a lead. Thank you, Dr. Winters. Truly. Mrs. Parker, she said before hanging up. Whatever you discover, remember that parenthood is about more than genetics. The child you raised is yours in all the ways that matter most. I wanted to believe her. But as I hung up, I couldn't help wondering if somewhere, in one of those other 3 families, my biological son was growing up without me, the local public library kept digital archives of the Columbus Dispatch. I found the birth announcements quickly. Jacob Thomas Parker, born April 17 to Mark and Emily Parker. Aidan James Wilson, born April 17 to Robert and Jennifer Wilson. Lucas Michael Rodriguez, born April 17 to Miguel and Sofia Rodriguez. Ethan David Chin, born April 17 to Daniel and May Chin. 4 baby boys. 4 families. 4 lives that might be intertwined in ways none of us had imagined. Stared at the names until they blurred together. One of these children might be my biological son. One of these families might be raising the baby I delivered. And one of these couples might have a genetic claim to Jacob. Finding them wouldn't be difficult in the age of social media. But approaching them would be another matter entirely. How do you tell strangers that the child they've raised for 15 years might not be theirs? How do you suggest a DNA test without sounding like a lunatic? I started with basic searches. The Wilsons were easiest to find. Robert Wilson was a dentist with his own practice, and Jennifer was active on multiple social media platforms. Their son Aidan was on the high school swim team, his achievements regularly featured in local sports pages. The Rodriguez family had moved to Cincinnati shortly after Lucas's birth, according to a moving announcement I found in an old community newsletter. Miguel was an engineer, Sophia a third-grade teacher. The Chens were more difficult. Daniel was a common name, and initial searches yielded too many results to narrow down. But a deeper dive revealed that Daniel Chin had been a resident physician at Ohio Regional in 2009, which explained why they delivered there. He was now an oncologist at Cleveland Clinic. I created a spreadsheet with all the information I could gather publicly. Names, occupations, current locations, children's activities. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, some smoking gun that would indicate which family might have our biological child. Photos that showed a boy who looked exactly like Mark. Reality wasn't that convenient. All 4 boys were now teenagers with distinct appearances shaped by puberty, personal style, and the vagaries of adolescent development. None looked definitively like either Mark or me, at least not from the limited photos I could find online. I was at an impasse. Without DNA testing, I couldn't prove anything. But I couldn't ask these families for DNA samples without explanation, and I couldn't explain my suspicions without sounding delusional. When I remembered something, Jacob had been tested for genetic predisposition to certain conditions when he was 10, after my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. The test had shown no concerning genetic markers, which had been a relief at the time. But now I wondered if those results held new significance. I called my mother that evening. "Mom, do you remember Jacob's genetic screening after your diagnosis? Did they happen to test for BRCA mutations?" "Of course," she replied. "That was the main reason we did it." "Why?" "And the results were negative, right?" "Thank goodness, yes. The genetic counselor said he doesn't carry the family mutation. Lucky boy got his father's genes there. Except he didn't have his father's genes at all, according to our recent test. If the hospital's genetic screening was accurate, Jacob didn't have my family's BRCA mutation either. Which meant he likely wasn't genetically related to either of us. The ground shifted beneath me once again. If Jacob wasn't genetically connected to either Mark or me, then we weren't dealing with a simple 2-family switch. This was potentially more complex and more devastating than I'd imagined. Mark's reaction to my research was surprisingly pragmatic. "If we're going to do this, we need legal advice," he said after reviewing my findings. "This isn't just about DNA. It's about parental rights, medical histories, potential lawsuits against the hospital." "I'm not interested in suing anyone," I clarified. "I just want the truth." "The truth could have massive legal implications," he countered. "If Jacob isn't biologically ours, and our biological child is out there, we need to understand our options." I hadn't allowed myself to think that far ahead. Would knowing the truth change how we felt about Jacob? Would we want custody of our biological child, even though they were a stranger to us? Would the other families feel the same? "One step at a time," I said, echoing my earlier mantra. "First, We need to confirm if there was actually a mix-up. Mark nodded, but his expression remained troubled. How do we do that without involving the other families yet? I've been thinking about that. What if we used one of those ancestry websites? If our biological child or their parents have ever submitted DNA, there might be matches. That's actually a good idea, Mark admitted. Much less invasive than approaching strangers. The next day, we both submitted samples to AncestryLink, the largest DNA database in the country. Unlike the paternity test, these results would take weeks, not days. More waiting, more uncertainty. But at least it was a path forward. In the meantime, I couldn't stop watching Jacob, searching for clues in his features, his mannerisms, his personality. He was in many ways the perfect blend of Mark and me, organized but creative, analytical but empathetic. Or had we simply raised him to embody those qualities? Nature versus nurture playing out in our living room. One evening, as Jacob worked on a detailed drawing of our backyard landscape, I found myself wondering which of the other families might have produced such an artistic child. The Wilsons, with their athletic son? The Rodriguez family, who posted photos of science fair projects? The Chens, whose social media suggested a musically inclined teenager? What are you staring at, Mom? Jacob asked suddenly, looking up from his sketchpad. Just admiring your work, I said quickly. You're so talented. He rolled his eyes, but I caught the small smile he tried to hide. It's just a sketch. It's beautiful, I insisted. You have a gift. Dad doesn't think art is practical, he said, returning to his drawing. He thinks I should focus on classes that will prepare me for the real world. The comment stung, not because it was untrue. Mark had always emphasized practical skills over creative pursuits, but because it highlighted the disconnect that had apparently always existed between them. Had Mark's unconscious awareness of their lack of biological connection influenced his attitude toward Jacob's interests? Your dad wants what's best for you, I said carefully. But that doesn't mean he's always right. Jacob shrugged. It's fine. I'm used to it. But it wasn't fine. And I wasn't sure any of us would ever get used to the truth, whatever it turned out to be. The AncestryLink results came back 3 weeks later. I was alone when I opened the email, Mark having left for a weekend conference in Chicago. With trembling fingers, I clicked through to my results. The ethnicity breakdown matched what I expected based on my family history, primarily European with some Native American ancestry. But it was the DNA matches section that made my breath catch. At the top of the list, labeled close family first degree, was a name I didn't recognize, Connor Mitchell. The site explained that first-degree relatives share approximately 50% of their DNA, parents, children, full siblings. This Connor Mitchell, whoever he was, shared 49.7% of my genetic makeup. My child. My son. I clicked on his profile with shaking hands. There wasn't much information, just a basic profile created a year earlier. No photos, no family tree, just a username, CMitch 2024. I immediately sent a message through the site's system. Hello Connor, my name is Emily Parker. According to AncestryLink, we appear to be closely related, likely parent and child. I believe there may have been a mix-up at Ohio Regional Medical Center in April 2009. If you or your parents are open to discussing this, please contact me. This is extremely important. Then I waited, constantly refreshing the page, hoping for a response that didn't come. Hours passed, and the initial shock gave way to a nauseating mixture of anticipation and dread. I had potentially found my biological son, but I had no way of knowing which family he belonged to, or if they were even aware of the situation. When Mark called that evening to check in, I told him everything. Connor Mitchell, he repeated. That name wasn't on your list of the 4 families. No, I confirmed. Either his parents changed his name from the birth announcement, or there are more than 4 families involved, Mark finished grimly. Have you checked my results yet? I hadn't even thought to look. Logging into his account, I navigated to the DNA matches section. There, at the top of his list, was another unfamiliar name, Ethan Chin, the same Ethan Chin born on April 17, 2009. The same Ethan Chen whose parents had delivered at Ohio Regional during the storm. According to Ancestry Link, he shared 49.8% of Mark's DNA. "Mark," I whispered into the phone. "I think I found our son." The puzzle pieces were starting to connect, but the picture they formed was more complex than we had imagined. Mark and I had apparently both found our biological children through Ancestry Link, but they weren't the same child. Our biological son was being raised by the Chin family, while my biological son was someone named Connor Mitchell, a name that hadn't appeared in the birth announcements, and Jacob, our Jacob, was genetically related to neither of us. According to both the paternity test and the absence of my family's BRCA mutation in his genetic screening, what had happened in that hospital 15 years ago? 2 days passed with no response from Connor's profile. Mark returned from his conference, and we tried to piece together the possibilities. "If Ethan Chin is my biological son," Mark reasoned, "and Connor Mitchell is yours, then Jacob must be biologically related to a third set of parents," I finished. "But which ones? The Wilsons? The Rodriguez family? Or someone else entirely? And who are the Mitchells? Why weren't they on your list?" I had no answers. But the next day, I received a notification from Ancestry Link. "You have a new message. Mrs. Parker, this is David Mitchell, Connor's father. Your message was forwarded to me as he is a minor. What exactly are you suggesting about my son? Please explain yourself fully before we consider any further communication." The tone was defensive, even hostile. But at least it was a response. I crafted a careful reply. "Mr. Mitchell, thank you for responding. This is difficult to explain via message, but I'll try to be clear. My husband and I recently discovered through DNA testing that our 15-year-old son, Jacob, is not biologically related to either of us. He was born at Ohio Regional on April 17, 2009. The Ancestry Link test shows that Connor shares my DNA at a parent-child level. I believe there may have been a mix-up at the hospital involving multiple babies. I'm not looking to disrupt your family, I just want to understand what happened. If you're open to a conversation, I would greatly appreciate it." His response came faster this time. "This is impossible. Connor was not born at Ohio Regional. He was born at home with a midwife on April 15, 2009. Your test must be wrong. April 15, not 17. And a home birth, not hospital." This contradicted everything I thought I knew. If Connor wasn't born at Ohio Regional, how could he be my biological son? And if he was born 2 days earlier, how could there have been a switch, unless a terrible suspicion began to form? I sent another message. "Mr. Mitchell, I understand your skepticism. This is confusing for all of us. May I ask, was Connor ever taken to Ohio Regional after his birth? Perhaps for a checkup or due to complications." Hours passed before his reply. "Yes. He developed jaundice the day after birth. Our midwife sent us to Ohio Regional's NICU on the 16th. He stayed overnight for treatment with the Billy Lights. But he was never out of our sight except for brief medical procedures." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Connor hadn't been switched with another baby, he had been switched with a blood sample. Somehow, during his brief stay in the NICU, his blood work had been mixed up with another newborn's. The hospital had the wrong genetic information on file, but that still didn't explain how he was genetically my son. Unless, I messaged again. "Mr. Mitchell, I know this is deeply personal, but did you and your wife use any reproductive assistance when conceiving Connor? Specifically, did you use donor eggs or IVF?" This time, the response took more than a day. When it finally came, it was longer and more measured than his previous messages. "Mrs. Parker, after discussing this with my wife, we've decided to be transparent with you. Yes, we used IVF with an anonymous egg donor. Connor is biologically my son but not my wife's. We've never hidden this from him, he's known his origin story since he was old enough to understand. What we don't understand is how you could possibly be showing as his biological mother. The donor process is supposed to be anonymous. Stared at the message, my hands trembling as the truth slowly crystallized. I had never donated eggs. I had never been through an IVF process. But there was one period in my life that I'd nearly forgotten. During my final year of physical therapy school, just before meeting Mark, I had been desperate for money to cover tuition. A classmate had mentioned that egg donation paid well. I had gone through the initial screening and been accepted, but ultimately changed my mind at the last minute, or so I thought. I'd signed the paperwork backing out of the process and walked away, or had I? The timeline matched perfectly. If my eggs had somehow been used despite my withdrawal, Connor could indeed be my biological child, just not one I had ever carried or given birth to. I typed a reply with shaking hands. Mr. Mitchell, this might sound incredible, but I donated eggs to a fertility clinic in Columbus around 2008. I withdrew from the process before extraction, or so I believed, but it seems possible my eggs were used for your IVF process anyway. This would explain our genetic connection without any hospital mix-up involving Connor directly. The implications were staggering. If Connor was biologically my child through an unauthorized egg donation, then the hospital switch must have involved Jacob and someone else entirely, likely the Chen's baby, Ethan, who showed as Mark's biological son. David Mitchell's next message confirmed my suspicions. We worked with Midwest Fertility Partners in 2008. Our donor was anonymous, #C247. We were told she was a graduate student in healthcare, 22 years old. This matches your profile at the time, I assume? If what you're suggesting is true, there may have been serious ethical violations at the fertility clinic. Had been donor candidate C247. But I had withdrawn before the procedure, or at least, that's what the paperwork I'd signed had indicated. Had the clinic proceeded anyway? Had they stolen my genetic material without my knowledge or consent? Before I could process this new revelation, another message appeared in my Ancestry link inbox, this one from an Chen, associated with Ethan Chen's profile. Ms. Parker, my husband and I received a notification about a potential parental match between your husband and our son. We're confused and concerned. Could you please explain what this is about? Now we had two separate threads to the mystery, my biological connection to Connor through what appeared to be unauthorized use of my eggs, and Mark's biological connection to Ethan Chen. But where did Jacob fit into all this? The answer came a week later, after exchanging multiple messages with both families. The Chens agreed to a phone call, during which Mei Chen revealed something stunning. We adopted Ethan as a newborn, she explained, her voice tentative. His birth mother was a patient of my husband's, a teenager who couldn't care for a baby. The adoption was arranged privately through a lawyer, but processed through Ohio Regional because Daniel worked there. Ethan was born on April 16, but we listed the official date as the 17th when we took custody. So Ethan's birth mother was a patient of your husband's? I asked, struggling to make sense of it all. Yes. Amanda Wilson. She was only 16 when she got pregnant. Wilson. The same last name as one of the other families who had delivered a baby boy on April 17. Had Robert and Jennifer Wilson's son Aiden been switched with Jacob after more discussions and eventually, carefully arranged DNA tests, the full story emerged like a nightmare jigsaw puzzle finally completed. Amanda Wilson, the teenage niece of Robert Wilson, had become pregnant at 16. The father was Mark, my husband, who had a brief relationship with her before meeting me. Neither of them knew about the pregnancy until after we were already dating seriously. Amanda had approached Mark privately and agreed to give the baby up for adoption with his financial support. The Chens, with Daniel Chen working at the hospital, arranged to adopt the baby through a private attorney. Meanwhile, across town, my eggs had been harvested and used without my knowledge after I'd withdrawn from the donor program. They were fertilized with David Mitchell's sperm, resulting in Connor's birth through his wife as the gestational carrier. As for Jacob, our Jacob, DNA testing showed that he was the biological son of Robert and Jennifer Wilson, whose own son Aiden turned out to be the biological child of Miguel and Sofia Rodriguez. The storm and power outage on April 17, 2009, had created the perfect conditions for an unprecedented series of mistakes. In the chaos, at least 3 babies had been switched. The Wilsons took home the Rodriguez baby, Aiden. The Rodriguez family took home a baby whose origins we still couldn't determine. And Mark and I took home the Wilson baby, Jacob. All the while, Mark's biological son with Amanda Wilson had been adopted by the Chens and named Ethan, and my biological son from stolen eggs had been born to the Mitchells and named Connor. 5 families. 5 children. 1 hospital. Countless lives forever altered. When we finally sat Jacob down to explain what we discovered, I expected anger, confusion, perhaps even rejection. Instead, he listened quietly, his artist's eyes taking in every detail, every emotion playing across our faces. "So biologically, I'm related to the Wilsons," he said finally, his voice steady. "But you're still my parents." "Always," I promised, tears streaming down my face. "Nothing will ever change that." "But there are other kids out there?" "Other families?" he asked. "Yes," Mark admitted. "And we need to figure out what to do about that." "I want to meet them," Jacob said immediately. "All of them. They're part of my story now." The first meeting was awkward, tense, filled with tears and accusations. The Wilsons were devastated to learn that Jacob was biologically theirs, yet had been raised by others. The Rodriguez family was still struggling to process that Aiden wasn't their child. The Chens were defensive about their adoption of Ethan, insisting they had followed all legal procedures. And the Mitchells were planning to sue the fertility clinic for using my eggs without consent. Lawsuits were filed. The hospital faced multiple investigations. The fertility clinic's records were subpoenaed. Amanda Wilson, now a 31-year-old woman with a family of her own, was forced to confront the past she'd tried to leave behind, but amid the legal battles and emotional turmoil, something unexpected happened. The 5 families, bound by circumstance and genetics, began to form connections. The teenagers, Jacob, Aiden, Lucas, Ethan, and Connor, found in each other the missing pieces of their identities. They shared not just DNA but experiences, interests, and the unique perspective of children whose origins had been scrambled by fate and human error. Mark and I had to confront difficult truths about our marriage, his hidden past with Amanda, my resentment of his years of emotional distance from Jacob. The Wilsons had to decide whether to pursue custody of Jacob, ultimately choosing instead to build a relationship with him that respected the bonds he'd formed with us. The Rodriguez family discovered that Lucas, the boy they'd raised, was not connected to any of the other families, suggesting yet another switch we hadn't uncovered. 2 years after Mark's casual statement about a DNA test shattered our world, we've created a new normal. Our extended, unconventional family now includes 5 sets of parents and 5 teenagers who share holidays, celebrate milestones together, and navigate the complex emotions of their unusual circumstances. Jacob still lives with us, though he now spends 1 weekend a month with the Wilsons. Ethan visits Mark regularly, eager to know the father he never knew he had. Connor and I have developed a relationship that's not quite mother-son but more than friendship, bonded by genetics but not by shared history. Mark and I remain married, our relationship altered but not destroyed by the revelations. The truth nearly broke us, but ultimately brought a deeper understanding. His distance from Jacob hadn't been paranoia or delusion, some part of him had sensed the missing connection. And my fierce defense of our family wasn't naivete but the truest expression of what parenthood really means. Dr. Winters was right, parenthood is about more than genetics. The children we raised became ours in all the ways that matter most. But the children we didn't raise, the ones connected to us by blood but raised by others, have also become part of our story, our family, our hearts. Sometimes, late at night, I still find myself staring at family photos, tracing features and similarities between faces. Not to find differences, but to celebrate connections, both the ones written in DNA and the ones we've chosen to create, the children we raised. The children we lost. The family we built. The truth that changed everything.
If this story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever discovered something that fundamentally changed how you viewed your family? I'd love to hear your experiences. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this touched you. More stories based on real dramas ahead, with strong morals, unexpected twists, and deep reflections on life.